You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to Barbell Logic, Beast Over Burden. I'm your host, Nikki Sims. With me is Andrew Jackson. We're both coaches at Barbell Logic Online Coaching, and we also help run the company. I do client experience and staff experience as the Chief Experience Officer, and Andrew makes sure we're running very systematically and efficiently as a Chief Operations Officer. Yes.
Karate chopping.
Oh yeah, if you're not on video, you will have missed me karate chopping. Just somehow I'm applying to, I think I'm just imagining it like at a factory in like some sort of assembly line where things are running really smoothly. Anyway, welcome to my brain.
I think I can say after working for about, a decade in factories all over the world, I've never seen anybody karate chopping the air as they're working in the factory.
That's because I have not run a factory. But if I did, I'm sure there's like a black belt, interestingly, in like Six Sigma and stuff, and yet no karate chopping.
Yes, that's true.
Interesting branding.
And no, yeah. It's a green belt, yellow belt, and black belt, I think, are the three categories of Six Sigma belting.
Which one did you get?
So when they started coming out with the belts in like the early to mid 2000s, which was a pretty big time investment by the company, you have to do this research project and be able to show that you've had statistical improvement in a process. Shortly after earning black belts, people were immediately leaving to go get hired at another company.
Oops.
Many companies figured out that they needed to come up with their own certification system. So I was never, when I came through, in the late 2000, through 2018, 19, when I left, I never actually became a Six Sigma black belt. Instead, I was a tool champion.
That's right.
And in fact, was certified in many tools. I even had a blazer, like a polo jacket that I would wear that had my company logo, and underneath was embroidered Tools Champion. I was a tool champion, Nikki.
Hold yourselves back, ladies. Hold yourselves back.
I, at one point in time, was the tool champion of the most number of tools that anyone in the company had.
Wow. What a legend.
I was champion of 11 different tools.
You were just a modern day Swiss Army knife of management. Well, now that you all know what kind of celebrity we're dealing with here, ladies and gentlemen, things will be different. Anyway, so I was riding my e-bike the other day, which, if you know anything about e-bikes, you don't really have to do a lot of pedaling because the bike does a lot of the work for you. But interestingly, I think we had done a spin class earlier that day. So I had gone to a class for someone to play really fun music and encourage me to work really hard on a bike that doesn't go anywhere. So then later in the day, I could sit on a bike that pedals itself basically with a battery.
Yeah.
That I strategically purchased so I didn't have to do any hard work.
Importantly, when I suggested, I think at one point during the day, that we could make the bike ride a workout that was somewhat challenging, that was an immediate no. That is not the purpose of riding a bike to the beach.
My e-bike is for fun only. It's not for work.
Paid money to ride in a dark room with 40 other people going nowhere, but listening to good music so that we didn't have to work later in the day.
Well, anyway, the moral of this story is that I was appreciating how much I enjoy being a physical human as I was riding my electric bike. But I was just taking inventory of like all the fun stuff that we do. We go on a lot of walks, we work out really hard, take spin class, we do zone 2 cardio. And like, I just had this really wonderful moment of appreciation for getting to be a human who gets to get in that zone where you get to be really, like in touch with what your muscles can do and getting a heart rate and being just kind of in that meditative state of physical output, and how fun it is that that gets to be such a large component of my life. And I later thought about how we would get messages from clients, still do, where they encounter something similar, but without actually getting to be in that state where they realize, man, I want to be able to be strong, and yet I also want to be able to do cardio, and I want to be flexible. And you want to feel good in all of those areas. And I would not say I'm very flexible, but I do feel like I'm in a nice physical state, and I was appreciating it. And so I wanted to ask you, like, you seem to be somewhere really similar. And I thought it'd be neat to talk about, like, what does it take to get there, and what is it actually like? Do you think you're in a similar state?
Yeah, I'm able to do the activities that I want to do and enjoy them without concern that it's going to derail my training. My strength numbers are as good as they've ever been. Not necessarily a lifetime 1RM perspective, but they're sort of in that 90-ish% range. I'm not tapering. I'm not trying to really chase a 1RM at the moment. But when I look at the numbers that I'm at right now, it's kind of in the ballpark of where I was training during the periods of time just before I hit some of my lifetime PRs. So, without trying to peak, I think I have productive training right now, maybe is the way I would describe it, meaning that I'm putting in work session to session that I think is contributing to building muscle mass and getting stronger over a long period of time. And I'm able to do that while also going on bike rides. Went on a pretty decent sized hike a couple weeks ago, and there were times in my past where I would have felt like that was compromising my training, or that, I was having to make trade-offs between either doing some activities or, pursuing strength training seriously, and that you kind of can only do one or the other. And I feel like I've been able to bring those into balance more effectively, I think, over the last year or two.
And do you think, looking back in the days where, each of us were like, no, I can't go on that hike because I have to squat 5x5 tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that at that time, when you were still in the phase of making the investment in strength, it was the, air quotes, right thing to do to not engage in those type of activities for the sake of your heavy lifting?
Right or wrong, I don't know if I would classify it that, but I don't think that it's from a long-term strategic strength and conditioning perspective. I don't think that there's a benefit to not doing those activities just for the sake of adding a little bit of weight to the bar. And I certainly, at this point in my training, don't think that way. And even for a beginner, I think there's intelligent ways that you can incorporate, your whatever activities you have outside the gym. I think strength training should be complementary to things that you're doing in your day-to-day life, not the thing that you are building your entire life around. If that is motivating to you and that's what your goals are, certainly there's more progress you can make in terms of measurable weight on the bar in the near term. But I think there's better ways to balance out strength training in your life that arguably, yes, might slow the progress down or might make the progress a little bit less predictable. But I wouldn't recommend to any of my clients now to avoid doing things they enjoy outside the gym just for the sake of adding a little bit of weight. Make sure you add weight to that next session. I just don't think that's the right priority personally, and I wouldn't advise people.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, I'm hearing that Andrew Jackson says you don't need to add weight to the bar. Just kidding.
My philosophy, at least what has helped me in my current phase of training, is that I no longer consider incremental weight on the bar, certainly from session to session, to be the outcome that matters. I think that weight going up on the bar, session to session, or week over week, or month over month, or some sort of whatever, pick your period of time that you care about, is a metric that, as we've talked about, PRs do matter, but I think of it as that. I think of it as a metric.
Okay.
And a metric is not a meaningful, or I don't think is an implicitly meaningful thing. It's a piece of information that helps you identify whether the thing you're doing is getting a measurable outcome that can reflect meaningful results.
Yeah.
So what do I mean by that? Well, we say weight going up on the bar is an indication that we're able to produce more force, which means we're getting stronger, which theoretically means that I have either more muscle mass and or more skill with the movement that we're measuring. But if I'm training, which is to do a thing over a long period of time to get a measurable desired outcome, then I don't actually care what my session to session weight is. I don't care what the weight is on this particular day. What I care about is that my training is productive towards my long-term goal. And sometimes that might need to mean, and we do this all the time with the way that we fluctuate our program. Sometimes we have a light day. Sometimes we have a low stress week. The bar is not always going to be heavier every single session. And that does not mean that it was an unproductive session, in my opinion.
Right.
So if I go for a hike or if we go spin, and then that ends up meaning I have to pull 5 pounds off or 10 pounds off for the day, or I don't hit every single rep that was programmed, that's okay.
And what it sounds like to me is you're separating the process from, each process itself being the training session, also being an outcome. So like if you put the weight or like the meaning of a workout onto, or if you associate that workout and its meaning with the amount of weight you're able to lift, it's like that workout day itself becomes the ultimate performance day,
Right.
judgment day. Did I do everything properly? What did I do wrong? And now in this perspective, you're identifying it as the process that can lead to an outcome which has many different qualities to it, more than what your 1RM or 5RM is.
We've talked a lot in the past about the difference between exercise and training. I think it's the same mistake from a different direction. If you get so wrapped around the axle about the weight of the day being a certain thing every single session, that's just as much of an error of exercise versus training as it is to show up and try to get hot and sweaty and think you're doing a good thing. The whole purpose is that we want to be doing this over a long period of time and in a sustainable way that still is, yes, driving weight measurably up over the bar for a long period of time, getting PRs, making meaningful changes to your physical health and the muscle mass that you have, the force you'll be able to produce. But if you get so wrapped around the axle about what the weight is on one particular session or one particular week, I think it's the same error. Type 2 error, maybe. Whatever. Type 1 error is show up, get hot and sweaty, and that's, an exercise error. Type 2 error is being so wrapped around the axle that you can't do anything else in your life.
Yeah, you're really specializing. So how do you think would be a good way to measure incremental improvement?
Well, I mean, certainly progressive overload is always at some level going to require either more reps at the same weight or more weight for the same number of reps and sets. Like I said, that still over a long period of time is something that I'm monitoring, and we certainly talk about how metrics matter and we automate that tracking process. So I'm not saying that progressive overload is not the thing that's required to be able to, drive strength progress. It's just that the tactical trade-off of one session in order for you to be able to do whatever is the other activity. Like, I don't want to sit there on a Saturday and say, cross my arms, oh, I guess I can't go hiking because I have a really tough squat session coming up on Monday or Tuesday. You could argue that it's a different type of progressive overload to go on the hike and then also follow that up with a heavy 3x5 squat session on Monday or Tuesday. And that is going to drive a different adaptation if you're not conditioned to be able to do both. So, that might be something else that you want to track over time is, how long does it take you to recover from going on a hike or a ruck or a spin class, and work with your coach who is going to be a little bit more familiar potentially with how those things are going to interact so that your schedule can accommodate it. It's a puzzle a little bit sometimes to figure out how to balance those different activities, But I think you can still drive measurable progress in terms of progressive overload over a long period of time while doing both. You just might not be able to do it every single session, as predictably.
Yeah. And this thought process has been in my head quite a bit, especially with all the buzz around longevity. Like Peter Attia in his book and his podcast, he has kind of a formula that includes being strong, it includes zone 2 cardio, and it includes like zone 5 cardio. And he's speaking to people who want to live a long time, which I would definitely include myself in that audience. And so I can't help but wonder, is there an amount of time, like you've invested years into getting strong. Do you think that was a very important thing that we each went through and that a lot of our listeners have gone through, where it's like 3 months to 2 years or somewhere even longer, where it's like blinders on, only getting stronger? Like, what do you think is the value of, if there is any, of like investing, 90% of your effort into some period of focused strength improvement and muscle gain?
I just don't think it's binary anymore. I think that you can develop cardiovascular capacity while also getting stronger, and that whatever benefit you might get by stopping all other activity just to get stronger for some period of time is relatively nearsighted and might even be detrimental in the long run. Meaning that if I sacrifice cardiovascular fitness in order to add 5, 10, or 15 pounds on the bar, or 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 pounds more on the bar, and 6 months later, now I've lost all of my ability to go enjoy a hike, but I'm 15 pounds stronger, I don't know if I would consider that a worthwhile investment.
We can't say that 15 pounds more on the bar bought you 5 more years of life.
Right. Yeah. And we have coaches that are kind of having to come to this also realization that maybe some of the health trade-offs, they're not sustainable or worth it. Is it really going to be worth it in the long run to maintain 260 pound or 270 pound body weight so that you can squat 600 pounds while not maintaining cardiovascular health? I don't know that anybody is arguing that that should be done. I always dislike saying in hindsight I would do something different, because absolutely, kind of going back to your original question, I don't think I would have the perspective that I do had I not done what I did.
Right.
And at the time, that was my priority. So if somebody wants to prioritize strength to the point that they're not conditioning, I'm not going to judge that. That's a path you can go. And I think there's some debate that I think you could argue that some amount of conditioning, even for somebody trying to get maximally strong, is a good thing. Because you'll be able to recover from your sets faster, you'll be able to train longer, you'll be able to train harder, you'll be able to recover session to session better. And I think that's pretty well understood in the strength world at this point. So again, going back to the original question, I just don't think it's binary. I think you can do both. I think you just have to be intelligent about how you merge them together. And I certainly would not suggest that somebody should be going like full CrossFit workouts and then try to strength train. So there might need to be some clarification around that, as I'm not saying, you can just do it all to the max and make progress. I also experienced that end of the thing, as well, where I just didn't get strong for a year because I was in a caloric deficit and doing 2 to 3 or 4 or 5 CrossFit workouts a week.
Yeah, it's like whenever you want to do something to the max, you're trading off. You're maxing out your resources and you're likely saying no to many other things. And while that might be the thing you want to do for a certain period of time, being aware of the trade-offs has its own value.
Yes. I guess what I would say also as a secondary response to your question is that I do think that training within a constrained program structure for a period of time, it's sort of like the Karate Kid, paint the fence, wax on, wax off. You have to, I think it is helpful to constrain the variables for a while so that you understand them. And we've talked about this before, and I think I posted about it a few weeks ago on Instagram, that you need to know the rules before you can break them effectively, or be working with somebody who knows the rules before you break them, because you can derail your training. You can derail your progress trying to do too much or not understanding how to balance it all. Like I said, it's just not binary, but it can be helpful to be binary about things for a period of time because it just removes noise and allows you to, like minimum effective dose, test, retest. But I think you can minimum effective dose your strength training with other activities intelligently if you understand how they affect each other.
I like that. I really like the way you put that, is knowing the rules before you can break them. Because like I was talking about earlier, there's kind of this sense of awareness of like, oh yeah, everything feels good right now. Or this feels really off right now. Like I am achy all the time. I'm not recovering. I can't seem to sleep enough. I'm hungry. And so you, like you said, removing noise, you pull things out and put things in strategically so you can start to build the understanding for yourself of what that feels like and what that looks like in terms of performance, body composition, other important health metrics.
Right.
And what that would, I think, mean practically, some examples like for nutrition, I think it's really valuable if someone will pull out alcohol for like 2 weeks or something, a month, just to know what it feels like to have that toxin removed from the environment.
Right.
And what it would feel like to eat to support your training, which depending on where you're coming from, it might be a caloric surplus so that you understand what it feels like to be fueled and energized and recover for your workouts and be able to feel very powerful every time you go in. And so instead of trying to push everything forward, like, training for, running a 5K and deadlifting 405, I think that was the thing for a while. Like before you do that, maybe do one of them pretty well, then do the other one pretty well, and then see what it's like to put them together so that you can have the awareness and also the understanding of how to train each, and then factor in what the variable of training for each is going to do to each of them and how you can manage the one very important thing that you can contribute to it, which is your own resources, how much you're eating, how much you're sleeping, how much time you can dedicate to anything. What would be like some practical cases of like adding constraints to remove noise?
I think limiting the number of exercises, the sets and rep schemes. This is why most beginner programs have a short list of exercises and a fairly restrained set and rep combination so that you can learn the skill of each lift, because your proficiency in the exercise or the movement can also have an impact on your ability to recover. If your technique is all over the place and every single rep looks and feels different, that's going to be harder to recover from because your body's having to do some totally, not totally, but in a significant enough difference in each rep is going to stress your body differently. So I think limiting the number of exercises initially helps. I think that's a constraint that's good. We've talked about it many times on the podcast, and you kind of alluded to there that getting a consistent baseline of nutrition and sleep are, if you can control those, are huge variables to standardize. I just kind of on that note had a client who wanted to lose weight, and they've been successful in doing so with macros, and decided as a 270 pound, 6'4" man to go on a 2,000 calorie a week diet. And
oh my,
that's a good example of going too far, and kind of another side of the coin of getting over fixated on the weight on the bar. That's to me another example of getting fixated on a metric as the outcome at the expense of not paying attention to how you feel, which is kind of, I think, along the lines of what you're going for, or what you're kind of talking about in this line of thought, is that people will stop paying attention to how they feel in order to prioritize a metric that is intended to help them feel better and perform better. And that could be more weight on the bar, that could be less calories on the app tracker, that could be more exercises, more tonnage. Like, you can get wrapped around all sorts of metrics that undermine the whole point of the thing, which is to look better, feel better, perform better. So I think standardizing as many of those variables as you can for periods of time are really helpful for helping you remember what good feels like.
Yeah, that's where so much this is coming from, is in the spirit of longevity, is having a span of life during which you feel really good. You enjoy yourself. You're able to do the things that you want to do. And those metrics might not be, me deadlifting 440 pounds. I deadlifted heavy. I'm not deadlifting right now at this moment. And amazingly enough, I am a happy, human.
It took a while to get there though, right? Like you had to go through a shift in perspective.
I had to mourn the loss of that version of Nikki.
Mm. That's a great way to put it though, because I think that's what happens is that you start to associate your identity, your ego gets attached to a metric.
Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute. What was the point of the metric in the first place?
Yeah, it creates like there's all this value and worth associated with it. And funny enough, I think we were talking about this too before, is like there's not really a lot going on my Instagram right now because, as I admitted, I'm not really lifting anything neat. And like I created that Instagram identity. And now what I'm doing now is so different. It's like, high rep curls and high rep leg presses. And it's not, all right, is Nikki gonna deadlift 365 for 5 today? Nope. It's like something totally different where that identity has changed, at least on my Instagram. So my Instagram it's a lot of beach pictures. And I just haven't been posting a lot of myself, which is really interesting. And that's like, as a coach, that's a way to get yourself out there. So just, as a tangent, that kind of sharing that type of physical expression, I haven't really found that portal yet, or even if I want to. But yeah, just related to the identity associated with metrics and even the trade-offs that come with that. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, an opportunity to reflect on what it is that you really want out of your training.
Yeah.
And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying weight going up is bad either.
Right.
Obviously, we want to get stronger. Obviously, we want to use barbells and use programming, but use them. Don't let your life get dominated by the thing that you're trying to use for yourself to accomplish goals.
Yeah, I agree. Still super important to intelligently load when it's necessary and also be open-minded to what other activities you can engage in.
Right.
Without it, meaning that you don't care about your training.
Yeah. And this is also, to be clear, for all the listeners that have a coach at Barbell Logic, not permission from Andrew to say to your coach that I can do whatever I want today. Please follow your coach's program.
They do know better.
And do your best to show up ready to train. But if you miss that last rep, and I see this all the time, client will be like, gosh. I go, front porch dad. Start beating themselves up. They're like, oh, I missed my protein target by 10 grams. Or, I played with my son yesterday for a couple hours at the park, and I think I just might have worn out my arms, or I was remodeling the bathroom, and, it's like roll with the punches. It was still a productive training session. They still fought for that last rep. We'll just make an adjustment to the program.
You engaged in life.
That's right. We'll come back and try it again.
I love it. Well, if I had to wrap up into a little box the formula for that kind of enjoyment of physicality, where you feel like you have a good beat on strength training, you have a good beat on cardiovascular health, what seems to work really well for myself and for my clients would be 3, strength training sessions per week. 2 works well if you're, I think, older than 50. 2 can work really well. And that can be distributed throughout the week too, if that frequency is better for the schedule. But there needs to be a couple of bouts of higher effort strength training where, whether it's, doing sets of 8 or 10, depending on what your goals are and resources are at the time, there needs to be high effort output. I don't think you need to hit RPE 10 on really high skill movements all the time. I don't think you should. But a couple of bouts of high effort work against an external object, so strength training. And I think the recommendations now are, a little under 2 hours of zone 2 cardio per week. We've been hitting that. Like, we walk a lot. We go to a spin class and definitely get into a zone 4 and 5 for that. But I feel like having that zone 2 frequency, zone 4 and 5 frequency, I'm ready for anything. I'm not worried that I'm going to gas out really easily. I know that my heart is getting a good, consistent bout of stress training in a good way. I know that my muscles are being challenged, and I know that I'm feeding myself to be able to feel energized. So that, want to go on a hike? Awesome. I would love to go on a hike, and I don't think that I'm going to be too tired to do it. Want to go to a spin class? Yes, absolutely. I want to go be able to do that. Like, I want to be able to say yes to these really fun physical activities. And I think that structure supports that without it needing to totally dictate my life.
Yeah.
And that is the secret to being a beast. There you have it. So if you're curious about what programming might look like, what your lifts maybe need to look like, I highly encourage you to schedule an experience call. Go to barbelllogic.com/experience. You'll end up on a calendar page where you can schedule a call with me, Nikki Berman, or Chrissy Marples, and we'll invite you to our app. You can upload videos of your lifts, and we will do a call with you and walk through everything. You can ask us programming questions, and we'd love to show you what it's like to actually get some input on your lift and have a coach guide you through these really interesting questions and answers that you have to sort out as you want to train for being strong and enjoying your life. Again, that's barbelllogic.com/experience. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, we'd love a review. We'd love a share. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.